Hey, everybody. Welcome to Circling the Bases. My name is Chris Crawford. Thanks for joining us today. Should be a fun one. I can't believe we're already halfway done with the season, and yet I also can't believe we're only halfway done at the same time. It's funny how that works. Let me bring on my guest today. It's a very good one. He currently covers the Blue Jays in his excellent Substack, The Bat Flip. Please welcome my friend, Andrew Stoeten. Andrew, how's it going?
It's going great, man.
Good.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. It's funny. We were just kind of talking right before recording that there was a little bit of a altercation between the Red Sox and Blue Jays. I think we're seeing that these two teams may not love each other. It doesn't quite, as Andrew brought up, live up to the altercation between the Mariners and Angels. But I think it's fair to say that there's no love lost between these two clubs right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Also, I mean, I wonder what the Canadian COVID rules, which are similar in the States. I don't want my Canadian friends to be harping on me about that. But Tanner Houck probably could have been useful to the Red Sox in the middle game of the series.
You know what? I think he could have been a little bit of help, and I wonder what he could have. I wonder what he could have done to be a part of that situation.
But yeah, it seems like there's tension everywhere.
There is tension, and part of it is also because these are two really good baseball teams. The AL East is just poor Baltimore. This is just a stupid situation. Before we talk about the Blue Jays, though, I have to ask you an important question. Is Jurassic Park a horror movie?
That's a great question. Is Jurassic Park a horror movie? It sort of is, right? I mean,
I was debating. I was debating this with my friends, and I think it absolutely is. And I think it's an interesting horror movie in that it doesn't set up like it's going to be a horror movie. It kind of sets up like it's going to be this mystical, wonderful thing of exploring the dinosaurs, and then it becomes kind of like an action movie, and then it becomes a flat out horror movie. Like, there are some jump scares in Jurassic Park that still chill me to this day. Like the scene with, for lack of a better term, Newman getting attacked by that dinosaur when its gills come out and start spewing the venom. I mean, I was 10 when that movie came out, and that shook me to my core. And the scene with the lawyer getting eaten and all of that stuff. I didn't get to very much sleep last night. And by very much sleep, I mean I didn't go to bed. Watched all three of the movies in a row. And I had never seen Jurassic Park 3.
Okay.
All right. That was definitely a movie.
Similar plot to the first one, I suspect. Don't they all have the basic same plot?
They all do. I will say the second one is kind of an underrated movie. Like, there's when the Tyrannosaurus Rex actually goes into San Diego and is just like destroying towns and like eating lampposts and stuff like that. It is very fun. But I wanted to ask you that question because a few of my friends said it's absolutely not a horror movie. There's just some scary stuff in it. But like, I think if you go like beat by beat and stuff, I think it technically is a horror movie, which is kind of crazy for a movie that was basically advertised for 10-year-olds.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. The more I think of it, the more I think you're right. I think Predator is another one that's sort of similar thing. It seems like it's an action movie. It seems like, and then it's like, no, that's a horror movie.
Oh yeah, that movie also gave me the heebie-jeebies. Something that has not given me the heebie-jeebies has been watching the Blue Jays over the last couple of years. I think they're the funnest team in baseball, and in part because they have so much young talent. And to start with, I don't want to talk about Vladimir, my sweet Vladdy Jr. I don't want to talk about Bichette. Those guys are great, and there's lots of fantasy relevant guys to talk about. I want to talk about Alejandro Kirk because this is getting ridiculous. All right. So at the end of April, this guy had a 584 OPS, and we were kind of wondering, and by we, I kind of mean me, talking about, boy, this could be a great opportunity for a prospect like Gabriel Moreno because, Alejandro Kirk just, he had a 339 OPS, but he wasn't driving the baseball at all. 245 average and 245 slugging kind of tells you the story. So then he posts a 94 OPS in the month of May. And then in June, he's 359, 462, 679. And it's worth pointing out that Alejandro Kirk wasn't like the same type of hype prospect as Gabriel Moreno, but he was far from an unknown. There was a lot to like about this guy's offensive ability. He's clearly put it together. I won't ask you if a 1.142 OPS is sustainable because of course it's not. I mean, 359, 462, 679 gets you your own wing in Cooperstown, much less getting in there. But how good can Alejandro Kirk be? And what do you think has been kind of the difference, especially from that terrible April start, other than the fact that it was just a small sample?
I think that may be it, right? And like, if you look at his numbers last year, some of the underlying metrics, he still hits the ball hard. He's still, he has great plate coverage. It's just hard to throw the ball past him. He walks,
Right.
he walks a lot. Like, there's all these underlying skills that that have kind of been bubbling up, as he's risen through the Jays system. And, he was
Right.
a guy that they always really liked. They always liked, the bat to ball skills. And the big knock on him was always, he just doesn't look like an athlete. He doesn't look like a guy you ever see. The speed isn't there so much, but so it's just the bar for him, because he doesn't do some other things. Was sort of high, and he's obviously crossed it. And I think that in April, he was getting to the balls. Like, he wasn't. It seemed like he was in between maybe a little bit, but he was still striking the ball, just not hitting it very hard. And I think that was sort of the thing. I don't really know what's unlocked this, why this has happened, and like what is going to come of it. Like, I think, what can he be? I mean, this is as good as he'll probably get. I mean, because this is about as good as anybody gets.
Right.
But yeah, it's wild. It's not unexpected that he is, making himself,
Sure.
a guy who they have to think about, when they have Moreno, one of the best prospects in baseball.
Right.
But it is obviously really unprecedented, and incredibly fun to watch too. I mean, he's the leading vote getter for the All-Star game for catchers. Like, he's gonna, everybody in Toronto, all the Jays fans across Canada want to see this guy, be the center of attention in the baseball world when the All-Star game happens. And
I would imagine he's quite popular with that fan base right now. No.
Absolutely. Oh man.
Yeah.
Dan Schulman, who does the broadcast for Sportsnet here in Toronto, he was saying, it was one of the noisiest moments of the season when he was when he had a single to lead off the ninth on Tuesday night.
Yeah.
And it's just, he was getting cheered when he was walking out to the bullpen before the start of the game here on Wednesday.
That's awesome. I mean, I'm just looking at this Baseball Savant page, and it's like a Wyoming election. There's so much red here, man. This is a guy whose expected batting average is in the 99th percentile. His expected slugging is in the 94th percentile. His expected weighted above average, I always struggle. We'll just call it the WABA, 98th percentile. And I think this is really interesting too. His framing numbers, if I remember last year, were not great. He's in the 96th percentile in that right now. His pop times have gone down, and his sprint speed, I mean, in the 6%. I'd love to see the 5% lower, to be completely honest with you, but it doesn't really matter. But this creates kind of an interesting, let's just talk about the long term here, because Gabriel Moreno does seem like a special type of prospect. Is Alejandro Kirk the long-term DH here, or is this going to be a situation where you think both guys are going to play both positions? Could they trade one of these guys? I mean, the value, you can't trade Alejandro Kirk, obviously, in 2022. The city would absolutely riot, and justifiably so. But does Gabriel Moreno now become kind of a movable piece? What do you think Gabriel Moreno's future is for the rest of 2022?
Yeah, for the rest of this year, I don't know, because they have Danny Jansen as well, who they really like.
Yep.
They the pitching staff really likes. He's starting to show some pop. He's been hurt a lot, but he's got, he just keeps hitting the ball. We've been calling him Danny Bats, like he, just yanking the ball over the left field fence. Like, that's been wild, and the fact that he's hurt has sort of changed things a bit. But I think at the start of the year, it felt like Kirk would be the odd man out, because the franchise, the organization really does like Jansen and likes his game calling, likes all. He was sort of the sound defensive guy, and like you say, previously Kirk's defensive metrics and whatever else, just even the eye test, it wasn't quite the same, and he's done a great job of coming a long way in a very short time. Like, the bottom of the zone, he frames exceptionally well, and that's reflected in that percentile ranking that he has right now. And so, I don't know if he's the guy that you make the long-term guy, just because he had a hip injury that he was on the 60-day last year. They're obviously being very careful. He's not playing every day. They're watching the wear and tear, because again, he's not just a different body type than you're used to seeing. And they like the DH spot as a place where they can rotate guys in and out of too, right? Like George Springer is going to need to DH, as that contract ages. Vlad gets DH days as well. there's, I think, always going to be somebody around who they're going to want to use that spot for. So, you can mix and match, while Kirk's good enough defensively that you can play him behind the plate a lot. I don't know if they're ready to give up on Danny Jansen, who, like I say, they really, really like him. But like Moreno, my understanding for a very long time, we've been hearing the drumbeat for a long time, is that Moreno was going to be the guy. And, before he even started moving up top 100s, it's like internally, this is like they were really excited about what they see from him, the athleticism and the bat to ball and all of that. It's like, he may not have a stretch like Kirk's having right now, but a really great offensive prospect and just as athletic as it comes behind the plate.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of him in the long term. I think he's more, for fantasy perspectives, more of a second catcher in 2 catcher leagues type of guy. Like, I can see him being a top 15 option. Some of it's going to come down to how much he's going to play. Obviously, there would be no harm in setting Moreno back down. There's no guarantee that I think he's going to be a huge part of this offense. But while he's up, I'm having him up. I guess the one concern I've had with Moreno a little bit this year is in both AAA and in the majors, he's not really driving the baseball. Like, the slugging percentage is .351 here, and it was .404 in AAA, which, it's only 36 games. And I do think that this guy has plus power. But that's my one little bit of concern about Moreno, is that I would like to see him start driving the baseball more. But extremely talented player. But I am absolutely in love with Alejandro Kirk. Yeah. I think he's a top 3 catcher for the rest of the year, and that might be 2 spots too high. How crazy is that?
It really, really is.
2 guys that did not surprise, although maybe a little bit surprising because they didn't get off to necessarily the hottest starts. We've got to talk about Bo Bichette and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. because it is like an actual legal requirement that we talk about him, especially when we have somebody as familiar with the Blue Jays on. Both guys kind of mediocre at the beginning of the year. Bichette especially, and I want to talk to you about the fact that Bo Bichette only has 5 stolen bases this year, which is not a number I was expecting. By the way, George Springer has 7 stolen bases, which is kind of funny because this was the one knock on him, I think, for fantasy is, will he ever run? And he's done quite a bit of running this year, which is nice to see. But both of these guys, I think, are offensive stalwarts for the rest of the year. Have you seen anything from Bichette and Vladdy Jr. that suggests that's not going to be true?
No. I mean, except for Bichette's start to the year, really. Right. I mean, Vlad kind of had a lull, a dip in May.
Yeah, high and low. Yeah.
Yeah. He, you look at the numbers and they're all, they're not quite where they were last year, but they're all, they look like an elite hitter's numbers.
Yes.
And yet it doesn't really feel like he's clicked yet. So like, he's a guy who I think there's another gear there. And it's felt maybe in June that he's starting to get there, but it still doesn't feel like he's, just having those weeks that can absolutely, not just carry your fantasy team, but carry the whole Blue Jays team. And that's coming, I think, but there's just too much there. Bo did have that weird start. He's another guy with great bat to ball skills. He, it was really, he was getting himself in bad counts. He's a guy who will be very aggressive at the plate. You'll see. We were calling him Bo and 2 for a while because there's a lot of that going on. Sure. But yeah, I mean, the power is just so easy especially for a guy who's not built like that. It's and he goes the other way all the time. He's just got as much natural talent as maybe not as anybody, but he's a great naturally talented hitter
for sure.
He's going to stick at shortstop for a long time, which I'm sure is important for the fantasy purposes.
Yes, sir.
Because they're not, there was talk in the off season, with the free agents, with Correa and with Seager, the Blue Jays maybe looked into that, but I think they're really committed to Bichette there. I think having Matt Chapman, who will be around next year as well, is going to, is kind of the cover that they provide for Bichette because he's not, the best defensive shortstop in the league. We'll say that, but he's been very competent and he gets better all the time, and I think that's a credit to him. But yeah, he would be the one that I would, not worry about, but I think you could see more dips and more highs and lows from him. I think Vlad is obviously what we all think Vlad is.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's worth pointing out too, like with Bo Bichette, the one thing that frustrates me with him is swings at a lot of pitches that are outside of the zone. Like his chase rates in the 7th percentile. And some of that is, like I say this phrase way too often, but you got to take bitter with better with a player like this because he's pretty darn good at making hard contact out of pitches outside of the strike zone as well. He likes to hit. And at the same time, it's not like He's in the 22nd percentile in walk percentage, which is obviously not elite, but we're not talking about Javi Baez or anything like that. His hard hit percentage is in the 85th percentile. I think long term, this is still a fantasy superstar. Even if Bichette did move over to second base, I still think he is. Vladdy, I don't know if I could ever be more confident outside of maybe Juan Soto, who's having a bad year this year, fantasy wise anyway. He's just going to hit and hit and hit. I think you probably saw some of this. There were some people who were bringing up the fact that after they moved from the minor league parks into Toronto, that the numbers were not quite as good. I think that's not a case of him taking advantage of minor league parks. I think that's a point of if he would have kept up that same pace, we would have had to question what the heck was going on. Like he was like on pace to be like one of the greatest power hitters of all time. It's pretty silly to question that guy's power, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It's unreal. I can't recall anybody that I've seen up close like it. And yeah. I think part of the moving thing is that he just wore down a little bit as the year went along. And he he had a big off season last year. He came came back from the COVID break, the first lockdown, a little overweight. They immediately moved him from third to first. They were kind of not super happy with the conditioning. Right. And then he really, really did a lot of work in the off season, and maybe that caught up with him a little bit by the end of the year that he's just been pushing his body so much. So there, you see them being a little more careful, a lot of DH days, and are trying to keep him in the lineup, whatever way they can, and have, I think, more this year than last, some first base options that they can plug in. They'll go to Gurriel, they'll go to Kevin Biggio, and that sort of allows him to stay in the lineup while not, just being careful with him, I think, and which is weird to say for a 23-year-old, but I do think that would be my theory as to why he wore down, why the numbers dipped at the end, as opposed to just changing from minor league parks.
I mean, I've wore down from May from just hosting a podcast 3 times a week. I can't imagine what being a 23-year-old going through, what he's going through, how tough. I just thought of this question: is he the face of the franchise, or is? I think he has to be, doesn't he?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's probably part of it too. I mean, there's pressure, there's media engagements. He can't go he can't go out on the town without anybody. He's a big dude who's very noticeably Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Like that's something I think he's lived with his whole life. Just because of his dad and because of when he became a preternatural baseball prospect, that sort of came with the territory. So I think he's probably better equipped than a lot of people. This must be, Alejandro Kirk's head must be spinning a little bit. You would think, except he's got the low pulse and nothing phases him, and that's something that they talked about even before this sort of thing happened that the Blue Jays really love about him.
Sure.
But yeah, I think Vlad carries a lot of weight and absolutely is the face of the franchise and is sort of the center of the Blue Jays universe, which. You could pick worse guys to be the center of the universe.
Oh gosh, yeah, and Bo Bichette would be the center of most franchises, to be honest.
I think so, yeah.
Which just speaks to how good my sweet Vladdy Jr. is. Weekends are better with MLB's Sunday leadoff coverage presented by Uber Eats. Catch the Royals take on the Tigers in Detroit on Sunday, July 3rd at 11:30 a.m. Eastern, live on NBC and Peacock. To learn more, ptv.com/MLB. And if you want a chance to win $25,000 on the game, download the NBC Sports Predictor app, powered by PointsBet, and enter Sunday's free Grand Slam Pick'em contest. I think the Blue Jays have a Peacock game coming up fairly soon.
Like 2. There's 2 before the end of the year, I think.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, those I've had so much fun. And by the way, we do a Sunday waiver wire Q&A right after the post-game show. It's me and a rotating guest. It's a lot of fun. The fact I have to wake up at 8 a.m. my time to do it isn't my favorite thing in the world, but we'll just negotiate that in my next contract. You brought up Matt Chapman just a little bit ago, and I wanted to talk to you about Chapman because, this is a guy, they gave up some solid prospects for, and over the first few months, at least offensively, things did not look good. He ended May with a line of 201, 286, 354. That's a 640 OPS from the hot quarter. Not exactly great. But in the month of June, and it's a sample of all of 79 at-bats coming into when we're recording, 266, 333, 544 with 5 homers. Are you buying this version of Matt Chapman or the one we saw over the first couple of months?
I mean, it's easy for me to buy on the positive side of Blue Jays stuff, but I am. I mean, he's a guy who, anecdotally, and I think also, if you look at the StatCast page, like he's been hitting the ball hard all year.
Yes.
He's been making good contact. He's been having good good plate appearances. The approach has been good. There was some strikeout at the start that's kind of like gotten better. But he was really a guy who just felt like he was snake bitten, and that before the balls started flying out of the ballparks a little bit more, say around mid-May, there were just so many like anecdotal. I could think back to like balls that it looked like he hit them on the screws and they just would die at the warning track, and it was just happening to him a lot.
Sure.
And that's sort of that has changed, and more balls are going over the fence. It's just the batted ball luck has been better. I don't know if he is exactly what those numbers in June are going to be going forward. But thinking about it, from the Jays' perspective, I think he was a league average hitter. I think he had a 101 weighted runs created plus last year.
Sure.
And that's sort of all you need him to be when he's as good with the glove. But I think that the Jays thought that there was more there. They probably were a little concerned at the start when there wasn't. But I think that what you're seeing now is definitely closer to what he can be. And I don't know if it's ever going to be 2018, 2019 again for Matt Chapman. But yeah, there's more in there for sure.
I mean, yeah, you don't expect to get MVP candidate, which he literally was in 2019. Honestly, it would be unfair if they got MVP candidate with how good this lineup is. They can have the almost as good version of Matt Chapman. Again, I've had a lot of fun watching this baseball team. But I'm glad the metrics, 93rd percentile in hard hit percentage, but expected batting average only in the 40th percentile because there is a lot of swing and miss in this profile.
Yeah.
And there always is going to be. I think it's interesting. Like, he's kind of the opposite of Bo Bichette, 96th percentile in chase rate. Like, he waits for his pitch. Fortunately, waiting for your pitch puts you in 2 strike counts, and 2 strike counts, I think everybody knows, are not the best thing. Kind of similar to Matt Chapman, I wanted to ask you about Jordan Groshans, because this is a guy who is currently in AAA and putting up okay numbers, but similar to Gabriel Moreno, and maybe the ball just isn't traveling in AAA right now. Just not driving the baseball, but hitting for a decent average. One of their top prospects, I think, a couple of years ago, who kind of got underrated because of injury, partially. Like, he's just not been able to stay on the field. Do you think he could be an option for the Blue Jays this year?
Harder to see. I mean, I think Chapman's obviously got third base locked down. He's been durable. Sure. That's what's going to have to happen to get Groshans in. I think his June has not been good. If you sort of, it's dangerous, obviously, like parceling it out and looking month by month, but May was great. I think it was like an 11.8% strikeout rate. Like, it was walking as much as he struck out basically. And the strikeouts have crept up everything across the board. I think the weighted runs created plus 53, obviously minor league, that's not quite calculated the same, but not what you want to see. And I think, and exactly what you say, he, like Moreno, he's just not been hitting the ball hard. And I think that's sort of, organizationally is something that they're not super concerned about with the really young guys who they think will grow into power. I was reading something, I think, in the Buffalo News the other day that was talking to Casey Candale, the Bison's manager, who was like, we're not worried. He's a good hitter. He can hit the ball. The power will come. They're not especially concerned about like getting him to tap into that power now as he's developing in the minor leagues. And that's sort of what it's interesting. That's what they do, with AAA. I don't know, maybe I don't know why I say that's interesting, except that, in the Alex Anthopoulos era here, it was very much like AA was where the prospects go. AAA was for the guys who are riding the yo-yo, the guys who have gripes. They kind of kept a lot of the the top prospects away from what would sometimes be not toxic environment, but just a different thing. But now with Shapiro and Atkins, they're very much AAA is where Moreno went, AAA is where Kirk went, where Alek Manoah ended up pitching in AAA. They're sending them all to Buffalo, and really have guys that they trust there. And so I assume if the Bison staff are saying, they're not worried about the power, they think it's going to eventually come. That's probably what the Jays think. But whether that's going to be this year or not, I don't see too much of an opportunity for Groshans here this year.
I think Groshans could be a guy, and I'm just kind of I haven't heard anything about this. He makes an awful lot of sense as a trade piece, I think, in part because of where he is at in his developmental stage. You have Matt Chapman for a couple of years. I think Orelvis Martinez is the third baseman of the future there. Would like to see Orelvis Martinez do a little better job with the approach at the plate, but there's no questioning the talent there. So I think, and if Groshans does get traded to an organization where he can play, I like him. I don't think he's ever going to be a 20 to 25 homer guy, but 15 to 18 and like a real good chance to be like a 280, 290 hitter. He kind of reminds me of Ty France a little bit. And there's nothing wrong with the Ty France. Maybe not hitting like 330, 340 like Ty France was earlier in the season, but a poor man's version of that is not so bad. Real quick, just for our fantasy folks, if Ricky Tiedemann is available in your dynasty league, go get this dude. Like, he is probably the most underrated pitching prospect in baseball right now for Vancouver. The last time I checked, a 0.96 ERA, and it's not that small of a sample size anymore. He's really impressive. He would be a guy I would absolutely looking to go get. And also, Adam Horwitz I always do this. Adam Horwitz is the Beastie Boy. Spencer Horwitz is the first baseman right now for the New Hampshire Fishing Cats. Big fan of this guy. And I've talked to a few scouts about this guy as a chance to be a really solid on base percentage guy. 293, 410, 507, 9 home runs, 3 stolen bases. I just ranked him in my top 10 first base prospects in baseball. Really underrated player, and a guy I think that has a chance to help those guys. This Blue Jays system's pretty good, Andrew.
It is. Suckers, they be saying they can strike out Spencer Horwitz. Can I give you one more name? Can I give you Jasper Zulueta, who just went to Double-A? He's been nice. Cuban guy who had Tommy John when they signed him after getting Kendrys Morales to Oakland and getting some international bonus pool money. They knew he had to have Tommy John, so they knew he was going to miss a year. Pitched 3 pitches last year, tore his ACL. He's just back now. He's moving real fast. He is a starter. He's got a starter's arsenal, but the innings are kind of a thing, and he'll touch triple digits. He is a guy that people are already seeing, like the fact that he's been promoted kind of aggressively here. Even though he's 24, he just doesn't have a lot of experience as a guy that the Blue Jays, who need swing and miss in their bullpen, are already probably looking to for the end of the year.
Yeah, that's a great call. He's somebody I profiled not too long ago. I think he's probably reliever at the end of the day, but man, he has a chance to be a really interesting arm. Real quick, before I get into the starters, especially one of my favorite pitchers in baseball, one of my favorite relief prospects in baseball, and I know that's a weird thing for anybody to say, Adrian Hernandez. Do you think he's a guy who could be up and helping the Blue Jays at some point this year?
I'm kind of surprised that he isn't yet. They signed Sergio Romo, and a lot of people are like, "Well, what?" Hernandez has that screwball, the screwball changeup kind of thing,
good.
It really is. I left wondering if they don't think that major leaguers are going to be fooled by it as much as AAA guys are. But looking at some of the guys that are in their bullpen right now. Why not? He's not on the 40-man. I think that if Romo doesn't, if he doesn't take that, Hernandez is probably the next guy to come up.
I really do believe that this guy could be a closer someday. That screwball changeup is so good. And part of one of the reasons why I like him so much is he's listed at 5'8". Everyone I've talked to suggests that might be overstating things a little bit here with the overall height. So anytime you could get like a backup point guard height pitcher throwing screwball pitches, by all means, give it to me all day long.
So Alejandro Kirk, who's probably about that size himself.
Yeah, that would be a lot of fun. Little different builds outside of the height. One's a little more square-shaped than the other one, and I think square-shape is being a little bit nice, but that is A-okay. We love our beefy boys. This guy is fairly beefy. His name is Alek Manoah. He is amazing. He has put up sensational numbers this year. I believe he's pitching another great game as we're recording right now, or he certainly was at the last time I checked. It's Boston's up 3-2, but he obviously hasn't gotten shelled. Does Alek Manoah have a chance to be – I mean, he's pitching like an ace right now, so it seems like a silly question. But does this guy have a chance to be an ace? I really think – just confirm. Yes. Say yes.
I think absolutely. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't use the changeup very much. It's not, he doesn't need to, and that's sort of been why he's been able to move. But if that turns into, an above average pitch, look out like that. I mean, right now he does have struggles with lefties. The Red Sox in this game that you're referring to, threw all the lefties they could at him. Because if you look at the splits, it's been tough. And yet he's still one of the ERA leaders in the league. He's been phenomenal, and it's just a kid, and it's barely pitched in the minors at all. I mean, he was like a number 6 overall prospect or draft pick. It kind of got lost behind, Nate Pearson was a guy the Blue Jays fans talked about a lot and sucked up a lot of air in the room, especially because of the arm that he has. And Manoah, doesn't light up the radar gun in the same way, but he's a bull out there. He still throws hard, not as hard. I think he was up to 96, which is a little rare for him in this particular game. But the slider is ridiculous. And right now, that's all he needs. But I think that he can absolutely be an ace. You add that changeup in it. It's there. You see flashes of it. You see he'll throw some good ones, but he just doesn't need it. He doesn't use it all that much. But I think that could be a game changer for him, which is crazy to think because he's doing so well, as it is. And just a guy everybody loves. Him and Alejandro Kirk right now are rock stars in Toronto.
Yeah, I can believe it too. And definitely guys that you want to give a little bit of extra space between the two, like on the plane, I'm guessing, because big guys. I mean, it's such a lazy comparison, but he really does remind me a little bit of a right-handed CC Sabathia.
I knew exactly that's what you were going to say. Yeah.
And the thing is, it's not just the fact that he's able to miss bats with that just ridiculous slider and a quality fastball. I mean, it's not an elite fastball, but because of the spin, I would put it as a well above average pitch. But he seems like such especially in today's day and age, the fact that you are basically locking him in to 6 innings every time he gets on the mound is massive. And I don't think it could be overstated that 6 innings and 2 runs of baseball are basically almost assuredly what you're going to get from this guy. I am a huge fan of him. We did our midseason draft, and I believe Manoah ended up being the 3rd pitcher off the board. Wow. Which, if you think about it, is pretty crazy. Shane McClanahan was the 1st pitcher off the board, which, I mean, nobody could have expected that. And then I think I took Justin Verlander 2nd, and then Shelley took Alek Manoah with the 3rd pick. And honestly, I considered Manoah over Justin Verlander just because part of it is I know he's going to get offensive run support. I always know that guy is going to get plenty of runs, and he's going to pitch deep enough for me to qualify. As stupid as the win category is, it's a part of fantasy baseball. It's always going to matter, unfortunately. Yeah, I think Alek Manoah's got a chance to be a really special arm. I thought, so this one's a little embarrassing. Mm-hmm. Jose Berrios. I predicted this guy to win the Cy Young Award. Whoops.
You're not alone.
No, I was not. The odds, if you go to PointsBet or other websites, were fairly high for him, and justifiably so. He was so good after that trade. And there have been flashes of brilliance. How concerned are you about Jose Berrios down the stretch?
I mean, not concerned. I mean, it's been too weird to just hand wave it away. I do like that the velocity's there, the stuff seems to be there. He's been having trouble locating. They're tinkering all the time with it. He's just been so durable and so consistent year in, year out.
Yeah.
Though if you look at you look at some of the StatCast stuff and it hasn't always been trending. And I think even if you go back a couple of years, it's not exactly trending in the right direction. Everybody here was willing to overlook that when they signed him to the big contract. Everyone was ecstatic when they made the trade for him. He was great down the stretch for the Jays. Looks like he's always great, except for whatever is going on this year. I'm mildly concerned. I don't even like that I'm mildly concerned. I mean, he's too good and has been too good for too long to not pull out of it. But when that happens, if you're talking about the 2022 season, there may be some bumps still. I mean, it's just that he doesn't have it figured out. He's not, locating his fastball well. Everything sort of plays off that, and it's been a bit of a mess. There's been some great games, and there's just been some real dogs, and sadly, it's been more of the latter than the former.
I mean, we talked about how Alejandro Kirk's savant page looked like a Wyoming election. Jose Berrios looks like a Western Washington election, unfortunately, with all of this blue. I mean, expecting slugging percentage, he's at the very bottom in baseball. Expecting batting average 4%, expected ERA 3%, bottom 7%, and average exit velocity, hard hit percentage, barrel rate. Everything here is pretty bad. The one thing here that gives me optimism, other than the fact that Jose Berrios does have a track record that suggests that he can turn this around. I mean, the stuff hasn't just completely gone away at the age of 28. I just refuse to believe that.
Yeah, no.
If you look here, he's throwing strikes. He's in the 78th percentile in base on ball percentage. That has not been an issue for him. He's also getting hitters to swing at pitches outside of the strike zone at the 71% rate, which is very good. His whiff percentage is only in the 12%. That does not add up. That shouldn't actually be possible. Like, if you have competent stuff, you would think that those pitches that they are chasing at would start swinging and missing more. So I think he's going to start missing more bats just because he does have that track record of doing so. I mean, unfortunately, if you're a fantasy manager that has Jose Berrios, everything that's happened, the bad luck doesn't matter. It's all locked into what has happened this year. But I would be, if somebody's willing to trade Jose Berrios, the fact that you don't have to take those stats with you, that is dropped off luggage. You don't have to worry about that. I think he will be better at the end of the season. But man, it is hard to justify looking at that Savant page other than the fact that I do think he is fooling hitters maybe more than these numbers suggest.
Yeah, I think probably, but also, I mean, hard contact has been a thing for him, even in Minnesota.
It's a good point. Yeah.
And that was, that sort of came with it, not like this, but yeah, he, when he's not locating, when he gets behind in counts, he's getting shelled. That has been a thing, but I'm with you. Like, there's just too much good there that he won't be able to pull out of it.
Yeah. And I think one thing that Blue Jay fans could take a little bit solace with is Austin Martin kind of looks a little bit lost. And I still have long-term hopes for that guy, just because his approach is so good and all of the athleticism is there. But I think he needs like a Steve Austin $6 million man swing revamp to actually start tapping into the power, because he is just not driving the baseball whatsoever. So Alek Manoah has been good. Jose Berrios has been bad. Ross Stripling has been good? Question mark. I mean, like, and it's not, the question mark is just because I'm surprised by it. All due respect to him, he was a guy who looked like he was kind of a thing when he was with the Dodgers, but he's been really good this year. And I think you've written about him a little bit in your Substack. What can we expect going forward from Ross Stripling?
That I think is the big question, because I mean, I think a lot of it is him making adjustments to stay ahead of teams that are getting a read on him. I looked at this week. I looked at his start against Boston this week and one that he had in April, and he was, the pitch mix was similar, but the way he was locating, what he was trying to do was very different. He was trying to elevate the fastball in the first one, was throwing a lot of changeups and sliders for strikes. The most recent one, the fastball was filling up the zone, wasn't really elevating a lot, wasn't trying to get swing and miss with those. And he actually, similar to Berrios, like you say, with the chase rate was there, but not the whiff rate, which is interesting. And he was working the edges of the zone with the changeup and with the slider, and just sort of keeping guys more off balance and not throwing as many fastballs as he did before. And that's obviously not his great pitch. His stuff is not overwhelming. But yeah, I mean, he's a smart guy. It seems he's willing to adapt. He's willing to do the little, because he has to. That's what he has to do to stay in the big leagues. He was also, people like him here because he was willing to go be the sixth starter, go pitch in relief, do all sorts of things. That doesn't help anybody in his fantasy team, but I think he's here in the rotation to stay. I mean, there's two guys behind him right now in terms of like the pecking order. I think Berrios will surpass him eventually. You say Kikuchi, a little more concerned about, but yeah, I don't know. I think that you can roll Stripling for a while because he has been really, really good. And you're right that he was kind of a thing with the Dodgers, and it's easy to forget. And I think a lot of Jays fans have like that American League bias where they're like, oh, well, he was in the National League, those numbers don't work out. It's like, he was getting guys out, even if you're facing the pitcher every once in a while. It's been good. It's and he locates well, and he throws any pitch in any count, and that I think gives him a real chance.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this guy; he's a 60% other, 40% fastball guy, and that's just not something you're seeing a ton of anymore in baseball. Like, that changeup is really good, and he's got a good. They call it a slider. I think it's more of a cutter, and then he'll occasionally mix in the curveball. Like, he does throw strikes with everything. I'll say this. From a fantasy perspective, I think Ross Stripling might actually mean streamer in Swahili. Like, that is just basically what he is. Like, I am not trusting him against a New York lineup or a Boston lineup or a Minnesota lineup. But I'm really trusting him against, I trust pretty much. Andrew, if you start against the Oakland Athletics, I'm putting you in my fantasy lineup. Just
I think that's fair.
Just right now, I mean, one of the worst lineups I think I have covered. But like, when he is facing those weaker lineups, because of the fact that he doesn't give up hard contact and he throws everything for strikes, a quality start is very possible. That's 6 innings of 3-run baseball or fewer. Definitely something that adds some value. You mentioned Nate Pearson. I was a huge fan of Nate Pearson, and I think I was definitely not alone on this. Like, the stuff is really impressive, but just hasn't been able to stay on the mound. Is there still a long-term future for Nate Pearson?
I think so, but I don't know. I don't think it's in the rotation at this point. I think that,
Right.
that I felt, this year coming into the year, it was like maybe, they were stretching him out in spring, and he got mono, which, is like, poor guy. I mean, it's one thing he's had bad luck with injuries, and it's in
100%.
addition to there being like not repetitive ones. He's had the obliques, and now he's got a lat strain, and like those ones from actually the physical forces of pitching are one thing, but he also broke his arm and missed a ton of time in his first pro season. Mono's has helped wipe out so much of this year, and now he's on the shelf again, shut down for 3 or 4 weeks. So it's going to be another wasted season for him. He's on the service clock now, which is going to make that kind of interesting eventually for the Blue Jays too.
Yes, yeah.
Because there's still a lot to like about the arm. I think they really, they like him as a guy. They like that, he's willing to get the data to do all the things that you need to be a modern pitcher. He just can't stay on the mound, and he can, and sometimes he can't stay out of his own head, I think too, which is he really opened a lot of eyes when he pitched out of the bullpen. I think it was in 2020 against the Rays in the playoffs, and looked great, and could obviously hump up to 100 in the bullpen, and maybe just not having a week to prepare for things is a benefit to him. But I think there is a future of some kind for him. Ideally on the Blue Jays, ideally it all comes together. But yeah, the clock is ticking on that.
I do think that it'll come together at some point. I have my question marks about whether or not it's going to be with the Blue Jays, and I will say like he and Groshans could be a real interesting package for something if they were looking for an upgrade somewhere. I mean, that would be something. It'd be selling low, I think, on Pearson. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be similar. I was thinking, like, is this a Jesus Luzardo situation? But Luzardo has shown, even in that terrible year last year, has shown more flashes of brilliance than Nate Pearson, to be completely honest with you. But I do think that he would be a guy I'm holding on to in dynasty leagues, because I don't think he's ever going to be a starter, but I think that stuff could be extremely special in relief, in part because I just don't want to look like an idiot. Andrew, thank you so much for doing this. Please promote all of the good stuff that you're doing, my friend.
Oh, all the good stuff. You can find it at thebatflip.ca. That's what us Canadians use instead of a .com. And you just find me on Twitter. That's really about it. I do a podcast on Callin called Blue Jays Happy Hour twice a week. We usually try to do them, post game. That's been a lot of fun, taking people's calls. I do it with Nick Ashbourne, who's a writer here, does stuff for Yahoo, does stuff for Sportsnet, and that's really about it. Yeah, just following a really fun team. I mean, I've been doing this since like 2007, so I've watched a lot of bad Blue Jays baseball seasons. And I got to tell you, this is it's real nice to be sitting here and nitpicking a team that you really feel confident is going to go to the playoffs. Like that doesn't happen around here very often.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'll be honest with you, I kind of grew up with the Blue Jays being such a great team in '92 and '93. Like, I had to get a Toronto Blue Jays hat, and it's fun to see them getting this thing. But by the way, you're way too young to have been covering anything since 2007.
Let me ask you, I'm older than you.
I'll ask you a real quick question. I don't believe you are actually a Maple Leafs fan, but
correct.
Has this city, I know it was frustrating for them to lose in the first round again. Is this one a little bit different, I think, because he lost to a team that went to 3 straight Stanley Cups and looked actually really good for most of it, or does it just not matter?
Oh, I mean, I'll get in trouble if I try to speak for Leafs Nation. I don't know. It seemed like it, but I do a lot of muting on my Twitter, so a lot of the diehard, the crazy Leafs fans, I don't get to encounter it. So
do you have a favorite hockey team? I think you do, but I don't.
I enjoy when the Montreal Canadiens are a thing, but also
Shane Wright?
I play fantasy hockey. Shane Wright, look, I think so. Yeah, fantasy is my game, so I cheer for the Peterano Maple Pete's. I've been in that keeper league since like 2003 with all the same guys.
That's great.
It's a little intense.
I got to get in a hockey keeper league. That sounds like so much fun.
Might have some spots open for it.
Hey, hit me up. You
okay.
My DMs are open. It's
All
funny,
right.
by the way, that my Kraken in a draft that has 3 really good players got the 4th pick.
Yeah.
I think I know how this franchise is going to turn out. Thank you guys so much again for listening. You can follow Andrew at Andrew Stoeten, and you can follow me at Crawford_MILB. If you like what you're hearing, please like, rate, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thanks again for listening, and we will talk to you guys soon.
Thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for all the latest fantasy and sports betting advice from NBC Sports Edge. And don't forget to sign up for NBC Sports Edge Plus to get the best-in-class draft guides, as well as season-long fantasy, DFS, and sports betting tools that will give you the edge.